What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen and I am back with another true crime video. So today's one is another video in the series that I created where we look into cases that have inspired huge changes in laws, reform, and just the community in general. I have done 2 in this so far. I will try to create a playlist, collect all of these in one location so that you can go back and reference them, or they're just easy to get to if you've missed one. Now, this one is incredibly important to me. It's near and dear to my heart. I speak a lot about MMIW and MMIP as often as I possibly can. This case comes from right here in the United States, dealing with the native population here and the laws that affect them and the things that they're going through. And there's just so much that is not understood or spoken about. So I'm trying really hard to learn all that I can so that I can pass it along to you guys so that you are informed and able to help make the changes that are so desperately needed. Now, as I already put in the beginning of this video, and I'm going to put for pretty much every single video from here on out, this is going to be a very upsetting video, you guys. It's going to probably trigger a lot of different individuals. There's children that are involved. It's very graphic. The brutality of this murder is honestly just unbelievable. So viewer discretion is definitely advised for this one. Savanna Greywind was brutally murdered and her unborn baby was stolen from her after being lured in by her neighbor in 2017. Now, Savannah's murder went on to inspire Savannah's Act, and I will get deeper into this at the end of the video, but this will hopefully help ensure that there is proper tribal access to criminal databases that are used nationwide by typical law enforcement. Prior to this, tribal government usually did not have a lot of access or any access to most of these. Also, Savannah's Act will hopefully create more standardized protocols when it comes to the response to missing and murdered Native women. Before I get into the details of this case, I do want to say a thank you to Harry's for partnering with me on today's video. It allows me to do what I do and give back to these families and these different charities as much as I possibly can. So I've never been a fan of disposable razors at all. I feel like it takes up a ton of space and you're constantly filling landfills by throwing them away all the time. So Harry's has given me a lot of peace of mind when it comes to self-care. Their razors have premium blades that give a close and comfortable shave, and their new two-tone handle design is reusable. Once your blade is done, all you have to do is pop in a refill and you have drastically cut down on your waste. Now, the blades themselves come with a precision trimmer, which is absolutely awesome. My husband loves to use that on his neck. And there's also a flex hinge that ensures that I don't chop my knee off every single time I shave. I'm the biggest fan of their foaming shave gel. My skin is very sensitive, but it loves the aloe and the hyaluronic acid that's in the formula. Plus the foam is super thick and creamy, so my dry skin is also left feeling hydrated and smooth. They're fair price razors with no pink tax, so let's give a round of applause for that. And Harry's also gives a percentage of their global sales to non-profit organizations. So not only are you cutting back on waste by choosing Harry's, but you're also helping give back to the community, which is literally half the purpose of this video, is finding ways to help those around us. And if you can replace something that you're going to use daily anyways with something from a brand that is dedicated to helping those around us, honestly, you can't really get much better than that. The best way to dive into using Harry's is by purchasing their starter set. You get a 5-blade razor, you get a weighted handle, a blade cover, and then also the foaming shave gel. You can redeem your starter set for just $3 if you go to harrys.com/Danielle. Thank you to Harry's for partnering with me on today's video. Thanks to them, I'm going to be able to make a large donation to MMIW USA. I will have the link to that down below. It's a nonprofit organization that helps to give a voice or amplify the voice of MMIW and ensure that there is justice and change. So now on to today's video. So Savannah was born on August 9th, 1995 in Belcourt, North Dakota on the Turtle Mountain Reservation. At the age of 10, so in 2005, she moved to Spirit Lake. And then after that, when she was in her late teens, she moved with her family to Fargo, North Dakota, which is ultimately where she ended up being brutally murdered. Savannah's family described her as always being incredibly responsible. She was the oldest of all the siblings, so she made sure to take care of everyone and look look out for them. Good kid. She worked hard, got great grades. She ended up graduating from Warwick High School in 2013 and then went on in 2014 to earn her certified nursing assistant license. And she used that to begin working at a senior living community called Eventide and really began to settle in life. And it was around this time that she moved with her family to Fargo. She moved to a different Eventide facility and she was incredibly happy. According to her family, they mainly moved to Fargo for her because she had so much drive and so much opportunity, and Spirit Lake, in their words, couldn't hold her. So they moved to a larger city where she could really get the most out of life. Savannah had a long-time boyfriend named Ashton. They had been dating since she was 15 years old, and now at the age of 22, they were expecting their first child. They were going to be having a baby girl by the name of Hazley Joe. At the time, Savannah was living in a basement apartment in Fargo with her mom, her dad, and her younger brother, and she had plans of moving to a big house on the outskirts of Fargo. She had always loved horses, so she wanted to be able to get a piece of land, a big house for everyone to live in, space to have horses, and that was the dream that she was pretty steadily working towards. And that summer of 2017, she was really inching closer. She had this great job. She was 8 months pregnant with her little girl, due in September, and at the very beginning of September, Ashton and Savannah had planned to move into their own apartment together. Everything was set up and ready to go, just in time to set up a space for Hazley. But unfortunately, 13 days before that could happen, the most horrific thing possible was done to Savannah and her unborn child. Saturday, August 19th, 2017, Savannah was at home. She, like I said, was 8 months pregnant at the time. She was spending her time preparing for Hazley, and that day she was also giving her siblings rides to work. And around 1:23 p.m., she sent her mom a text message to let her know that she had ordered a pizza for the family for lunch, and she was heading up to a neighbor's apartment, the apartment of Brooke Cruz and William Hohen. According to the text, Brooke had popped her head in out of nowhere into the apartment that Savannah's family was in, and she had asked Savannah for some help. She told Savannah that she was in the middle of a sewing project and she really needed a model for the dress that she was making, and so she offered Savannah $20 for the help. As a backstory to Brooke and William, and a lot of this was not known to the Greywinds at the time, Brooke and William were by no stretch of the imagination close to the Greywinds. They were just another set of neighbors that lived in the same apartment complex. I believe that Brooke would occasionally go into the Dollar General nearby. I think she worked at one point. I don't think it was the one that Savannah's mom worked at, but she'd buy some things there. Savannah's mom worked there, so I'm sure they said hello in passing, but they did not spend really any time together. And Brooke and William were actually known for creating a fair bit of chaos in the apartment complex. So since they moved in, their fights were well known and heard by all of their surrounding neighbors. They had violent fights very frequently. The police had been called out at least one time that I know of that ended in charges. I guess during one of their arguments, William threw Brooke into the bathtub, and he ended up being charged with assault and given a no contact order, which ultimately was not followed. They also just had patchy histories, both of them on their own. Brooke had at least 7 children from previous relationships, and William had 2. Neither Brooke or William really had anything to do with their children, and William had even been in trouble for not paying child support, so had Brooke. It's a very complicated, kind of tricky situation. I kind of get deeper into the history of them later on in the video. Brooke even had attacked her ex-husband with a knife. There had been allegations of that. I don't know if there were ever any charges. According to her ex-husband, she abandoned her children multiple times, just like up and left the country. Brooke kept meticulous diaries that were found after all of this happened, where she pretty much explained everything happening in her daily life. And it almost seemed like it was coming from this like idyllic point of view where she believed that she was doing everything possible good, but all of these bad things were happening to her. She denied a whole bunch of things, denied ever going at her husband with a knife. She basically said that all the men she was in relationships with were bullies and they lied in order to keep all 7 of her children. And honestly, I can't say what's true and what is not because I genuinely do not know. She was studying psychology at the time. She was incredibly smart from what I've seen. She even made it on the dean's list at one point. And so I think in her mind, she was very, very well put together and she was highly intelligent. Everything found in her apartment was immaculate. She kept calendars to a T, journals to a T, but those that actually had contact with her in person, like her partners and people along those lines, usually didn't have many good things to say. There was actually once a reference of hers that said Cruz was, quote, a nasty woman who destroyed her family's lives, including her children. So, tricky water. I don't know if it's a matter of her perspective being flawed or if she was a victim of all these things that she was claiming. I have absolutely no idea. She did self-diagnose a lot. I think she was actually diagnosed with things like anxiety, but she self-diagnosed with PTSD, and I guess all of her journals were just like filled with all of her symptoms. She would analyze other people. I don't know. Odd situation. I don't know much about William's history other than he was convicted of child neglect and abuse the same year that he began to date Brooke. He had nothing to do with his children for the most part. So it was complicated, and that is just the kind of couple that they were. That was their lifestyle. That was their history. But again, the family, the Greywinds, did not know much of this, and Savannah was more than happy to help out a neighbor for an extra $20 in her pocket to get baby supplies. I'm sure she thought absolutely nothing of it because who would? Should have been probably not even an hour-long visit, turned into Savannah never coming back home. So Savannah was in constant communication with everyone in her life. She would immediately respond back to texts with her family, but as the afternoon went on, her family's texting her, responding to the text that she had sent, and they are getting absolutely nothing back, which is unlike Savannah. When her family was home that day and kind of checked into things, they noticed that her wallet was still in the house or in the apartment. Her car was still outside, so she hadn't driven anywhere or run any errands to buy baby things. And the pizza that she had ordered was still sitting on the counter, cold and completely untouched. And around 4 p.m., her family began to search for her. So that should kind of go to show how out of character this was for her. She was not even gone for more than 3 hours. And they're like, oh, absolutely not. Something's happening here. I believe her brother was one of the first to head up to the 3rd floor apartment where Brooke and William lived. Her father went after that 2 times, I believe. And then her mother finally went up there. And from my understanding, they had all been told that Savannah had already left. If Savannah had, in fact, already left their apartment, most of the articles claim that she did, that didn't make any sense because where on earth is an 8-month pregnant woman going to go without her wallet, without her car, on foot in the middle of the summer? So around 4:30 p.m., when they still were unsure where Savannah was, the Greywinds decided to call into Fargo Police Department to report Savannah as missing. So Officer Samuel Bowman was the first to arrive and spoke to the family. He was told that all of her important things were left behind, that she didn't head out in her car, she didn't have any money on her other than maybe the $20 she was promised, and there just wasn't any reason she would have left anywhere without saying anything or getting those items. So at this point, Officer Bowman went up to William and Brooke's apartment. Now, he knocked on the door and the door immediately flew open. He later went on to testify that it was like they had been waiting for him to come and knock. And both William and Brooke said that Savannah had already left. I believe they gave the time of 2:45 or sometime around 2 p.m. And that they had absolutely no idea where she was. The last time they saw her, she was totally fine and she left. Shortly after this, both William and Brooke agreed to allow the officer in to search the apartment. So Officer Bowman did just that. He very casually walked around the apartment. I don't think he went into certain locations specifically, like the kitchen. He just peeked his head into some of the rooms, and ultimately he determined that there was absolutely nothing amiss, filed the missing person report, and he left. And that was pretty much it. But her family knew better. that there was something going on. This was not right. This did not add up. And so her family ended up gathering that night, like 20 or 25 of them at the apartment complex to try to figure out what was going on, look for her, and honestly get answers from Brooke and William. Around 10 p.m. that night, a disturbance call ended up going into Fargo Police Department because the family was all very upset, understandably, at the apartment complex. I'm sorry if you can hear my baby chicks in the bathroom, but it's the safest place for them to be right now when I have cats. Anyway, so officers responded to the apartment for a second time that day on August 19th. When they arrived, Savannah's family pleaded with them and said, look, do something, do a second search. You know, this does not make sense. We know Savannah. She was so excited for this baby. This does not add up. She's still not home. She has nothing of no personal belongings or anything she needs with her. Something had to have happened. They did end up ultimately going and asking Brooke and William a second time, can we search? They again gave permission. Another quick search was done, but again, they determined that nothing odd was found. So the officers told the crowd of upset, confused, worried family members that nothing was in the apartment. There was no sign that anything happened to Savannah in the apartment. She wasn't in the apartment. And so the crowd needed to disperse. Following day of the 20th, the investigation into Savanna Greywind's disappearance continued. Police ended up coming back. Savannah had still not returned. And at this point, she's 8 months pregnant. That puts her at pretty high risk. So they kind of started to take things a little more serious and they searched the apartment for the third time, again with permission, no warrant or anything. And still they said there was nothing. Savannah's family continued to urge police to do something. But despite the strange circumstances, police continued to announce that there were no signs of foul play, so they were just looking for a missing person. Now, Savannah was part of the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, and also her family had ties to the Turtle Mountain Band in Chippewa, so both tribes obviously immediately jumped into action for one of their own. They traveled to Fargo, North Dakota to help the family look for her, and multiple searches were organized. I'm talking hundreds of people were out there walking around, checking for any sign of Savannah because the police did not seem to be doing any active searches that I have seen. Meanwhile, Police Chief David Todd was making pleas to the public, asking them to help locate Savannah, keep an eye out for her, because this is obviously a potentially very dangerous situation for not just Savannah, but her unborn baby. As the searches continued, we are now 4 days into Savannah's disappearance. It is August 23rd, and the police decided to speak to William for an official interview. My assumption, because I've not been able to see anything clarified online, is that they were trying to figure out, maybe where Savannah had gone after leaving the apartment, or had he potentially done something. So they brought him in, and William told Fargo police that he had been working at his job. He worked for a roofing company that Saturday, and that he got off between 2 and 2:30 p.m. Now, he said that he did in fact see Savannah that day. He went into his apartment and Savannah was sitting on his couch. So this kind of adds up to Savannah being there with Brooke because of the sewing project. And he said that Brooke introduced the two, and he quickly went to turn on his computer to play video games and then went to get in the shower. And he said that he heard them talking most of the time that he was showering and turning on his computer. He didn't know what they were talking about, but that when he got out, Savannah had left at that point. That was his story, and he seemed to be sticking to it. He didn't know where Savannah went. He hadn't seen her again afterwards, and he basically was saying that they were just being attacked for no reason and bothered for no reason by not just the police, but the Greywind family. Now, something to police, however, seemed off. Obviously, I think we can all see it. So police decided to go and speak to a few of William's co-workers to kind of see, had he been off that day? Had he acted strange in the days afterwards? Did he mention anything? And they were absolutely shocked at what they were told. According to William's co-workers, in the days following Saturday the 19th, William spoke about having a newborn baby at home, that Brooke had just had a baby. They had a new baby that they had named Phoenix, which was strange because police had searched the home at this point 3 times. They had questioned William. They never saw signs of a baby. no crib, no toys, no crying. The most obvious, there was no baby. And also, he had failed to mention anything about it in his interviews. So it was odd that he was talking about this newborn baby, which you should see signs of that everywhere in a home. But in those 3 searches, there was just nothing. And also, it was very strange because Savannah was last known to be at their apartment on the 19th. And she was 8 months pregnant. So she wasn't due for another month, but suddenly after that day, she goes missing and they have a newborn baby. No one remembered Brooke ever looking pregnant. Something was very off. Now, there was a series of bizarre events after this, and I don't know exactly how they played out. There's not a lot of information out there, but either late on the 23rd or early into the 24th, the couple ended up in a hit and run accident. I'm not sure if they were the ones that hit someone and ran, or if they were the ones that were hit and someone ran. I highly doubt that it's the latter. But while police were investigating this hit and run, it ended up tracing back to William. Okay, so they're like, all right, this William guy, here he is on our radar again. And apparently this hit and run had happened by a Walmart, and they found that William and Brooke had gone to this Walmart to buy newborn diapers. So between that and the fact that they were talking about this newborn baby, allegedly, according to these coworkers, this was kind of like the thing that proved to authorities that there was something going on. They decided this was enough to go ahead and get a no-knock warrant. So they were hoping, basically, with this no-knock warrant, that they would show up unannounced and it may catch them off guard in case they were hiding the baby or doing something like that when the police searched those 3 other times, because they kind of had a period where they could have done that before. So they ended up showing up to the house, used a battering ram to get inside, and lo and behold, who is inside but Brooke and a newborn baby out of nowhere. The baby itself was clearly just days old, thankfully was very, very healthy, but obviously she was whisked away to a local hospital and eventually put into the hands of social services. And when this was happening, Savannah's family was having to watch as this baby is taken out of their apartment, knowing that this baby was very likely Savannah's. And then having to wonder, okay, if this is Savannah's baby and she wasn't due for a month, then what happened to Savannah? And because there was no proof at the moment that this was Savannah's baby, they had no option to see her. They had no option to hold her. I mean, Ashton is standing there seeing this child for the first time, and that's his baby, and he can't go and hold her. They had to prove first, understandably, that that was, in fact, Savannah's baby. But imagine having to go through that. Unimaginable. So right away, Brooke was immediately arrested and brought in for questioning. Despite saying that, Savannah just came over that day when she originally spoke to police, and that, they hadn't seen her, she had left, everything was fine. Brooke admitted that the baby that she had with her in the apartment was in fact Savannah's. But the story that she told made not a bit of sense. So she told police that on the 19th, Savannah had actually come to her claiming to be very unhappy with life. She was not happy. She did not want the baby. And she wanted Brooke to basically help her induce her own labor. So Brooke told police that she showed Savannah how to start her own labor, showed her how to break her own water with, quote, a shish kebab stick. And after that, Savannah left. She said Savannah was healthy on her own 2 feet, planning on inducing her own labor, and she was gone. Now, she failed to tell that to anyone that same day when her family was showing up asking what was going on, when the police were showing up asking what was going on. But then she claimed that how she ended up with the baby is that Savannah showed up early in the morning hours of the 21st. She claimed that Savannah climbed through some hole in a fence somewhere and shows up with this baby and says, hey, I have the baby. I want you to have it. I want you to take it. And then after handing over this little girl, Savannah just vanished into the darkness again. Now, police were not buying this for a plethora of reasons. And they ended up telling Brooke that they had searched all of her electronics, and they found multiple searches from just a week prior for things like, if a pregnant woman holds her breath, does the baby keep breathing? I mean, I didn't even include half of the quotes because it just makes me sick to my stomach. And these were things like that had been looked up for a while, about like how to have a home birth, things along those lines. So it appeared that there was some either fascination or this had been a plan for quite a long time at this point. But when Brooke was confronted with all of this information, she basically said that she never searched that there were other people with access to all of her electronics, and that was just something totally not related. So William ended up being arrested after Brooke. He was at work at the time, and he was confronted about what his coworkers had said about him having a newborn at home, the fact that the police just arrested Brooke with a baby that she's claiming is Savannah's, and also that they saw this diaper run to Walmart. And they asked him whose baby was in his apartment directly, and he told them, quote, "I can't tell you for sure." Now, despite originally telling police in his first interview that he said hello to Savannah after coming home from work that day on the 19th, he at this point started to change his story and ultimately somewhat admit to what had happened. So according to William, when he arrived home that day on the 19th after work, found Brooke and a newborn baby. He walked in and heard cries and was like, wait a minute. He said that Brooke held up the baby to him and said, quote, "This is our baby. This is our family." He told the police that the baby had been sleeping in a suitcase the entire time, that he didn't want to buy a crib yet, and that they had taken the baby on outings. He told police that he had helped clean up all of the blood on the floor and the bathroom, that he put bloody towels and his bloody pair of shoes into trash bags, and that he was going to take them to the dumpster in town. He basically was saying, out of nowhere, there's this baby and blood all over the floor, and there's no sign of Savannah. He doesn't mention that she's anywhere. He told police that Brooke had told him months prior that she was pregnant, so he knew she was pregnant, according to what he said, but he wasn't expecting her to have the baby there. It was just a surprise, but at the same time, he knew she was pregnant. That's at least what he told police. So that is his explanation, that Brooke was pregnant, so clearly she had a home birth, which matched up to these strange searches on the phones, and that he basically just helped her clean up the mess of the home birth and was like, oh, okay, cool, a baby. But he also told police that the baby had been there during all of the searches. So according to him, they had put the baby that they, according to coworkers, had named Phoenix under blankets on the bed every single time police came and searched. And he said that the baby was just a really good baby, so the baby never cried. Even stated that when they had gone to Walmart to buy the diapers, the baby was with them. And when they got home from Walmart, they brought the baby inside, quite literally just as police were arriving to speak to them. So there were this many close calls, and somehow nobody managed to find this baby every single time. But Brooke's interview kind of went against what William was saying. Brooke openly said to police that this baby was Savannah's baby. It was not hers, that she wasn't pregnant. She directly said, "No, I am not pregnant," in one of the interviews, and that Savannah crawled through this hole in the fence and then gave the baby to Brooke. So police could still tell they were not getting the full story, and Savannah was still nowhere to be found. Now, while the searches for Savannah were ongoing and the couple was being held, DNA testing did in fact end up confirming that this in fact was Savannah's baby. So this led to the reality that something horrible had likely happened. Whether it's what Brooke was claiming or if it was something else, it was yet to be known, but it was clear at this point that they needed to find Savannah as soon as humanly possible. There were still ongoing searches from volunteers. They did manage to find a breast pump and an area of blood at a location near the Red River. This was the first big thing that anyone had found. Police did immediately go out to this location to search. They searched the entire area, but unfortunately didn't find any sign of Savannah at all. But then on the 27th of August, 8 days after Savannah went missing, something was found. Kayakers in the neighboring state of Minnesota were out on the Red River at around 5:45 p.m. that day, and they noticed that there was something kind of floating in the water awkwardly. It looked like it had gotten snagged on a floating log, and when they got closer, it looked like something large that was wrapped in plastic and duct taped closed. And they said that it was the smell that gave things away pretty much right away. So they immediately called the police. They waited with this object for like over 30 minutes for police to arrive. And when police arrived, they began efforts to get this object out of the water. Now, apparently the currents were incredibly strong in this location. It took them hours to finally pull the object out. It was made of multiple trash bags, again, wrapped in duct tape, and from the way that it looked, it was obviously a body. And when those bags were torn open, it did not take long at all for them to realize that this was 22-year-old Savannah, who had been 8 months pregnant. She had a rope around her neck, and her stomach had been cut open. This was a fetal abduction and a homicide. I don't even think that there are words for what Savannah's family felt and went through during this time. I cannot imagine. It is difficult to even read about this. It is difficult to think about this, let alone know that someone had to go through what Savannah went through, and then her family had to go through learning what happened to her. I have covered a lot on this channel, but I think that this may be one of the most gut-wrenching, awful, horrendous things that I have ever spoken about to date. Savannah's body was taken to Ramsey County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy. While people marched and prayed just outside, they all wore green ribbons, which was Savannah's favorite color. There were also hundreds that gathered at a nearby field for a prayer circle. Many different tribal rituals were done to honor Savannah. There was a water walk that was done. They did this because Savannah was found in the water and because her baby had been held in water. And ultimately, on August 28th, both Brooke and William were charged with conspiracy to commit murder as well as kidnapping. Now, Brooke was the first to go on trial, and she ended up pleading guilty on December 11th, 2017. She basically said that there was nothing that she could do to change what she did, so at the very least, she could own up to what happened. And what she confessed in her testimony is mind-boggling. So according to Brooke, what kind of led to this point is that she had actually lied to William about being pregnant in early 2017. And we know from William's interviews that he said that he thought she was pregnant. Now, I don't know how you would think someone's pregnant for like 8 months and not see it. But regardless, she said she lied to him and that he thought she was pregnant the whole time. But regardless, she said that she had used an old pregnancy test, old ultrasound photos. She also found the sound of a heartbeat online to play to him and said that that was their baby. She claimed that she did this because they were having issues in their relationship. They were not in a good spot. So she felt that a baby might make him happy, which unfortunately is a thing that a lot of women fall into. And it even got to the point where she was so dedicated to this lie that she said she began to believe she was pregnant, and her body even started to show symptoms of being pregnant, which is a thing that can absolutely happen. However, that false reality that she had created and that she claimed William was going along with shattered in early August, so just weeks before Savannah was killed. Brooke told the jury that during an argument in early August, William told Brooke that he knew she wasn't pregnant. He complained to her and really dug in on her, saying that he had already told people, that people were looking forward to it, and that she needed to, quote, produce a baby. And so in her mind, she said that she felt that was an ultimatum and that he was basically telling her that she needed to get a baby no matter what that meant, that the way she got it didn't matter. He just wanted her to come up with a baby, to replace the one that she never was actually pregnant with. And so she decided to do just that. So at this point, Brooke starts frantically searching for options, which explains a lot of the different things that she had searched. Like I said, she had a journal, and the journal, she talked about like black market IVF. She talked about all sorts of things in relation to getting a baby. And I guess about a week after William told her that he knew she was lying, he came home one day, just totally random, and said, quote, "That Greywind girl is really pregnant." And again, Brooke hears that, and so she thought that he was implying that Savannah's baby is the one that he wanted. Now, according to when she testified, he never explicitly said any of these things. He never directly said steal someone's baby. He never directly said to take Savannah's baby. He never directly told her to do anything that would harm anyone. But she said these different things were just what she believed he was implying. So she began to plan. Now, there had been other things found within the apartment. There was a piece of paper with due date August 6th on it, and it had been scratched off. According to the Greywinds, which makes that very eerie, Brooke had come to their apartment around that time asking for Savannah to come up to her apartment with her. So it seems, and Savannah didn't go. So it seems that potentially these due dates were days that she was planning to lure Savannah in, and it didn't work out, or she backed out of it. But on the 19th, she did finally execute her plan. And according to these calendars that were so meticulously taken care of, the 19th wasn't marked off on the calendar or every day after that. So clearly they had something pretty serious going on. So she said that she invited Savannah up while William was at work. She promised her this $20 if she would come up and model this dress for the sewing project. But once they got upstairs, Brooke said that she became nervous about what she was planning on doing. Now, this is solely my assumption, but it seems to me that she needed to find a way to justify what she was doing. So it was easier for her to do, which makes me kind of want to vomit as those words come out of my mouth. But the way she did this is she decided to start an argument with Savannah, because I guess, again, my total assumption, that would make it easier for her to do something to her. So she apparently accused Savannah of all these ridiculous things, like I think it was like throwing her cat or stealing her mail and stuff like that. And so this started an argument, and this bogus argument ended physically when Brooke claims that she shoved Savannah, and Savannah fell into the sink in the bathroom. She hit her head on the sink and then fell to the ground unconscious. At this point, Brooke claimed she grabbed a knife and proceeded to cut Savannah's baby out. Those are words that literally should never have to be spoken. Absolutely ever. Shortly after this, Brooke claims that William returned home from work, and so she showed him the baby and said, "This is our baby." Now, despite William claiming there was just blood on the floor, like his whole story of "I just got home and she randomly had a baby on the floor," Brooke says that Savannah was still on the floor as well when he got home. And she claims that William asked if Savannah was dead, to which Brooke said, "I don't know, please help me." William allegedly left the room after this and returned with only his boxers on and with a rope in his hand. And according to Brooke, they had ropes in their house frequently, but because apparently William had a keen preference to tying Brooke up while they were being intimate. So he had ropes on hand. And after this, Brooke says that William put the rope around Savannah's neck and said, quote, "If she wasn't dead before, she is now." So she told the jury that Savannah at this point was then wrapped up in towels and bags and put into the bathroom closet, and admitted that not only, which we learned from William's interview, was the baby in the house when the police did the first two searches, but so was Savannah's body in the closet in the bathroom. Now, Savannah's family was infuriated that somehow police managed to miss this and claimed that they executed poor searches. How do you go into a house 2 times and miss a baby the first thing, and then find out later on that not just did they miss a baby, but they missed a body. And even more infuriating, apparently the Greywind family had directly told police to check the bathroom closet. From what I have seen, a member of the Greywind family had lived in the apartment that both Brooke and William lived in, and in that bathroom closet there was like this random like hidden door compartment thing, and so they were like, check that, but clearly it was never checked. However, police have also stated they understand the frustration, but those first two searches were done without a warrant. So they were bound by the laws, obviously. They had no probable cause at this point. So when they went into the house, they weren't allowed to open things that weren't already open. So if that closet door was closed, they legally had no power or ability to open the door. So those things simply could not be checked. The Greywinds were also upset because they had seen when Brooke and William returned home from Walmart and had the baby with them. Granted, the Greywinds did not know at the time that they had Savannah's baby, but they had gone to police after seeing Brooke run inside with like this bag under her arm that she was super protective and like paranoid about very clearly. And she was like, you need to go to their apartment right now. You need to go and look in that bag. There's something going on. And ultimately, the police would not go and check this bag, which we now know was very likely Savannah's baby. It was found that William had hollowed out a dresser on the 20th and put Savannah inside before moving the dresser, carrying it downstairs himself on the 21st. At least he claims he carried it down himself. And from there, at some point, they took Savannah to the river. And the details of getting Savannah to the river, there's not really a lot of information about. And from my understanding, that information in general of how they even got Savannah to the river and this hollowed out dresser wasn't even known until a witness came forward to testify against William, which I'll get to in a minute. So Dr. Froloff, the medical examiner, was unable to say for sure, and he testified this, if Savannah's death was caused by strangulation or blood loss. And I'm sure you can immediately see the problem with this. Cutting open Savannah, which causes blood loss and could have led to her death, making Brooke the murderer. And then we also have her saying that William put a rope around Savannah's neck. A rope was in fact found around her neck when her body was found in the river, which if she died from strangulation, that could make William the killer. But because they could not say either way, there were as evidence of both of those, it really left a lot of things up in the air. Also, it seems pretty clear that the stories that both William and Brooke were telling, even if there was some truth in there, didn't seem to fully be the truth. Because despite the fact that Brooke claimed that she got into this argument with Savannah and pushed her and then her head hit the sink and fell unconscious, Dr. Froloff claimed that there was absolutely no evidence of a head injury when he performed the autopsy. So that puts into question how the state Savannah was in when all of this was happening and what actually happened to her. But because Brooke essentially admitted to killing Savannah and she stood up for William, said that he just helped clean it up with no knowledge, that she planned the whole thing pretty much, the charges of conspiracy to commit murder against William were dropped. In September of 2018, he was acquitted of them. And so those were gone, and he was only charged with conspiring to commit kidnapping and providing false information to police. So his attorney, when he went to trial, argued that he obviously didn't commit any homicidal violence. Brooke said it herself. There were also other witnesses and pieces of evidence. Nothing at all proved that he did. So that was kind of their argument, that yes, he helped clean up, but he had nothing to do with it. So Brian Grob testified. This was the cellmate that put forward the information about the dresser being hollowed out. He was William's cellmate while he was awaiting trial, and he testified that William admitted openly to helping clean things up. He told him everything about how he opened up the dresser and then nailed the back to the front and all these other things to close it up basically so that she could be transported, but that William never said anything about directly killing Savannah nor being a part of the planning. So that so far kind of supports what William is claiming, even though he completely denied ever putting a rope around her neck or anything like that. He's still admitting to people that he did clean up after what happened. His ex-fiance also testified that William admitted to her over the phone while he was awaiting trial that he made poor decisions after finding out what was going on when he walked into the home that day, but again reiterated that he had no part in the planning or the murder. And then also, to not support that, but just a bit of the evidence, Brandon McCullum, who is a DNA analyst, was not ever able to find any blood in their vehicle, which isn't all too surprising because she was wrapped in so many things and then placed inside of a wooden object. And they also weren't able to find any DNA from Brooke or William on the rope around Savannah's neck. Doesn't mean there wasn't anything there, but unfortunately, because she was in water, I'm sure some of the water maybe penetrated into the bag. I highly doubt it was watertight. That could have easily taken away any physical evidence. William continued to argue pretty heavily that he had genuinely believed that she was pregnant, that Brooke was pregnant the entire time, and that this was just one giant cleanup situation after the fact when he learned what was really going on. And he also admitted to taking bags, those bloody bags, off to another dumpster, like super far away in West Fargo. And when police questioned why he didn't just put it in the apartment dumpster, if he genuinely initially did believe that this was his baby and Brooke had given birth, he said that he just didn't want to draw any more attention to himself because the Greywind family already believed he did something. So that was his explanation. So it's just incredibly frustrating because it's like the explanations that are given, it seems obvious that they're crap, but at the same time, like, they could potentially be true and there's no evidence to actually prove that they're crap. And so it's really frustrating. Dr. Frederick Keeley also testified. He was the first to examine Hazley, and he did say that she was in great condition. Thankfully, I'm so happy that nothing happened to Savannah and Ashton's baby. But he also spoke about the fact that he wasn't sure this could have been done by one person. The whole, taking the baby out of Savannah. He said that it takes upwards of a dozen people to perform a C-section at a hospital. And he said that, quote, it would be impossible, end quote, for him to basically perform a C-section alone. Literally impossible. He said the effort that it takes, all of that, you at least have to have basically two people. And so he was really indicating that he didn't believe Brooke did this by herself, which again puts into question, was William there? Like, is she just covering for him? Honestly, it's so irritating to hear all of this questionable information, which makes it seem like William could have played a much larger part in this. And because Brooke has this history of bad relationships, and it seems that while their relationship wasn't great, he did also have moments where he really said he cared about her and acted like he cared about her. And it could have had her under this, oh my gosh, finally a man that loves me, I'll protect him type of situation. So I don't know if we'll ever fully know the truth of what happened. Because Brooke also spoke about certain things that are very questionable about him. The fact that she said he had violent fantasies and spoke about them frequently. He spoke about having fantasies of wanting to sexually assault women. After speaking about that, he went on to talk about even wanting to kill women and specifically strangle them, which is interesting because he claimed that he never strangled her, yet there is a rope around Savannah's neck, and also he has multiple witnesses claiming that his thing is strangling people in bed. So I just don't know, you guys. Special Agent Jesse Smith also testified at the trials against both of them. There were searches recovered on the electronics of both William and Brooke, which I think is incredibly important for things like example 1, how to make a noose. How do I register my baby's birth after a home delivery in North Dakota? If a pregnant mother dies, how long until the baby dies? Unassisted home birth instructions. How long does it take to pass out? And probably one of the most devastating things that came out during the trial is when Savannah's parents took the stand and testified. Apparently, in the days after Savannah's disappearance, when nobody knew what happened to her at this point, she's still just a missing person, William came up to them, you guys, shook their hand and said, "I'm sorry about what happened to your daughter." Which obviously took them back because as far as anyone knew yet, nothing had happened to her. I would have lost my mind. absolutely lost my mind. Ultimately, Brooke was sentenced to life in prison in February of 2018. William did end up pleading guilty to his 2 new charges now that the conspiracy to commit murder had been dropped, whatever. And he was sentenced to life in prison as well, though. So it seemed like at least they both were going away forever and they were not going to come out. Savannah's mother said after William was finally sentenced, quote, "He betrayed our family. He looked us in the eye with a straight face while our daughter lay dead in his apartment. Please don't ever consider letting him out." In an honestly absolutely messed up, devastating turn of events, William ended up appealing his sentence, which is nothing like out of the norm. I would expect that most people do. But the Supreme Court freaking overturned it. They overturned his life sentence. So the Supreme Court basically said that the judge that handed down this life sentence initially had deemed him as a special offender. Basically that he was incredibly dangerous. And according to what they saw in the sentencing, this was, I guess, based off of his criminal history, like his past. And when you are determining a sentence like that, it's supposed to have to do with the current crime. That's just how it was explained. And so his past never should have been taken into account, essentially, which in my opinion is dumb. But regardless, the maximum sentence for his charges, because he should not be considered a special offender, is only 21 years. So he ended up being resentenced to 20 years in prison, and that is it. The same man that has abused children, hurt children, helped clean up a murder scene, lied to the police, all these things, 20 freaking years. Hazley did go on to live with Savannah's parents and her father. He had to fight for custody of her. She is so well loved and so cared for. I have tried to see if they have a current GoFundMe, but I have not found one. I know that they used to have one to help them cover the costs of Hazley, but I do know that Savannah's family runs a Facebook page. I will have that link down below. They keep everyone updated if there's anything at all that they need or anything going on. That's also updated there. You see photos of Hazley growing up and living her life and visiting her mother's grave and all of these different things, which honestly, she is like a little miracle because a lot of children would not have survived that. But it's a really great and beautiful place to get to know the both of them, not just Hazley, but Savannah, and see people share their memories and really honor her the best way that they possibly can. So this brings us to how Savannah inspired change. So about a month after her death, Heidi Heitkamp, I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. I apologize if I did not. She was a North Dakota senator. She introduced Savannah's Act. The act in a nutshell would have the goal of improving tribal access to crime databases, which I mentioned in the beginning, create standardized protocols for the response to missing and murdered Indigenous Native American women. So that is like, again, very broad, and I'll kind of get deeper into it in a minute. But first, we know me and how I feel about all of this and the videos that I usually do on MMIW and MMIP. I want to kind of give a backstory and some statistics to people just so you have a better understanding of how these sort of things happen to begin with and why there is such a huge need for public education on this topic and change when it comes to policy making, all of those things. So, according to Safe Women Strong Nations, which I will have linked down below, 4 in 5 Native women have experienced violence, and 1 in 2 have experienced sexual assault specifically. There are even certain reservations where women are murdered at over 10 times the national average. So you can see that being a Native woman is absurdly dangerous, incredibly unfair, and as a fellow woman, makes me want to freaking throw up and cry. Another statistic in terms of all of that violence, because I can literally feel the comments coming and now I can feel it. The perpetrators, most of the time, are non-Native men. And if we want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, 90% of physical violence against Native women are committed by a non-Native partner. So while I'm not denying there is not issues going on within reservations, because I've spoken to a lot of you about things like that, 90% statistically is non-native men living off of the reservation. And honestly, that's incredibly inconvenient because the Supreme Court ruled in 1978 that tribal courts have absolutely no jurisdiction over non-natives. So if 90% of non-natives are committing these physical acts against these women, what on earth is supposed to be done when they cannot have any jurisdiction over those non-natives? Now, I will say that things did eventually change around a decade ago to where tribes do have jurisdiction now over things like domestic violence and sexual assault, but that's kind of where that stops. Now, because they also have absolutely no access when it comes to these tribal governments to these different criminal databases that are used nationally, they're basically attempting to investigate a crime when it comes to these non-native criminals without having absolutely any resources to look into. So imagine going into a crime and like not having half the background of what exactly that person is, like of who exactly that person is, things they've been booked for before, like all of these different things. It basically leads to all the cases going cold and no investigating being done because there's just nothing to go off of most of the time. And on top of that, the jurisdictional issues have created huge problems in terms of solving and investigating these crimes. Just because tribal governments cannot have jurisdiction over non-natives, that doesn't mean that nothing at all should be done. So in terms of that, the DOJ is actually supposed to step in, take over the case, and prosecute. Again, federal government for the felonies, it works the exact same way, and then state government, local government for anything else. But unfortunately, for some unknown reason, they usually don't prosecute. Nothing is done. It's not investigated. It just kind of sits. And I've seen multiple different reasons for this. As someone who has had no personal experience with it, I can't really say for sure. I've seen that it has to do with a lack of cooperation, just straight up ignoring the fact that this violence is going on. I've seen a whole list of things. Statistically, I think like half of the homicides that happen are not investigated by the DOJ, and then like a third or less of the sexual assaults are actually investigated and prosecuted. So that's like a very, very small amount. When the tribal government has their hands tied and expect the federal government or the state government or local government to step in, more times than not, they don't actually do it. Because of all of these different things, I'm sure as well as other things, there is pretty much no drive at all to investigate by tribal police. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of support. Usually the tribal governments are very small. There's not enough manpower. I could go on and on and on. And while there have been some attempts over the years to have some of these tribes sign up to certain databases that they are allowed to go into, many don't have the money or resources to do it. So they don't have the computers, they're outdated, or they can't afford to update those computers or the software or things along those lines, which unfortunately also shouldn't be an issue because we have billions of dollars in the US Crime Victims Fund that are supposed to go towards tribes for those exact things. So there should be absolutely no lack of money. However, the states are apparently in control of distributing that money. And according to a study between 2010 and 2014, 0.5% of those funds were distributed. So basically all of this money that they could use to upgrade things to then be able to utilize the databases that they did have access to, which was little to none, to be able to provide training and do all these things and, hire on more people to properly investigate, to properly prosecute. They can't do it because the money's not being given to them. So it's just all around, it's just a problem. Now, I have seen that initially when the U.S. Crime Victims Fund started, it didn't even include tribal land, it didn't include the tribal government, but I guess they did eventually put them on there, but still just weren't giving them money. And then I just quickly looked it up. In 2021, Congress authorized set-aside funds from the Crime Victims Fund for a Tribal Victim Services set-aside program, which will provide support to tribal communities to enhance services for victims of crime, consistent with the requirements of the Victims of Crime Act. So it looks like there's also more being done on that front. After a ton of pushing and fighting and refusing to give up, in October of 2020, Savannah's Act was public law. It was fully passed. Now, I have the entire thing linked down below, so if you want to go and look at it in its entirety, you can check it out, but I will give a brief summary really quickly here. Now, I'm just specifically reading off points, so if I'm not staring at the camera, that's why. Savannah's Act is to help clarify the responsibilities of all the numerous agencies involved. So everything from federal to tribal when it comes to how they respond to missing and murdered natives. Basically, it's to increase the coordination and efforts of all of those agencies so that they work together to get things done instead of just being an absolute mess and fighting over jurisdiction. It also includes the medical examiner's office, the coroner's office. Basically, they do not want anything to be able to fall through the cracks. The purpose is also to empower tribal governments with the resources and the information that they need in order to properly investigate and respond to these crimes, which I think is going to have one of the largest impacts. It will help with collection and sharing of data, which again is another thing that's led to cases just not being investigated. And just as a little tidbit, apparently the DOJ didn't even report tribal crime data or share it until 1999. So no wonder there's just been crap statistics for such a long time. It also will provide tribal governments with access to the National Crime Information Center, the Combined DNA Index System, the Next Generation Identification System, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, and the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. So all of these things that have been so wildly beneficial in terms of solving crimes for most of the United States, just now able to be accessed by tribal governments, which please let that sink in. And then everyone wonders why those cases never get solved and things never get done. Well, there's your answer. How many times has NamUs helped? How many times has the National Crime Information Center helped? DOJ is also required under Savannah's Act to conduct outreach to ensure that the tribal governments are aware of what they have access to and how to use it properly. And it is also now required that the DOJ report statistics on missing and murdered Native Americans so that we can finally have some sort of accurate data, because what we have now is just the tip of the iceberg. Senator John Hoeven, who is also the chairman of the Senate Committee of Indian Affairs, stated, quote, "Savannah's Act addresses a tragic issue in Indian country and helps establish better law enforcement practices to track, solve, and prevent these crimes against Native Americans. We appreciate our House colleagues for passing the bill today and sending it on to the president to become law. At the same time, we continue working to advance more legislation like this to strengthen public safety in tribal communities and ensure victims of crime receive support and justice." This is an absolutely massive, massive step. Savannah's Act has done a lot. Set a really high bar of expectations when it comes to change and ensuring that support is given, proper support to these different reservations, to the tribal government. And that's why I feel like this needs to be shared as far and wide as possible to ensure that every tribal government is aware of the changes and how they can benefit from it and what they need to expect help with and the funds that they should expect to receive. And also to make sure that our government knows that we are aware of the promises that have been made and how we expect them to uphold them. Now, thankfully, there are other things as well in motion that will help alongside Savannah's Act. The National Institute of Justice created the baseline study, and the study is basically to study the health, wellness, and safety of all AI and AN living within their communities. Again, this is kind of hoping to collect proper data. Data is so important. It helps with all sorts of things, and because there's been such a spotty lack of proper data when it comes to all of these things, this will hopefully help to educate and inform the public and policymakers of the different issues at hand that are affecting these communities and the Native people, so that hopefully there can be changes and we can find some solutions because we will have a better understanding. In 2019, there was also an executive order that was signed to investigate all of the unsolved cases of missing and murdered Native women. It was kind of broad and I couldn't find too much information out about it. And then also the Non-Invisible Act began in 2020 to help with intergovernmental coordination when it comes to violent crime, specifically against Native women, as well as addressing the high death rate of Native women, because as I said, sometimes 10 times the national average. This is a ton of positive change, and while it was so incredibly difficult to hear that that sort of thing had to happen to push for this positive change to be put into place, I'm also also so incredibly hopeful and thankful that it was able to make a difference, and hopefully can continue to make a difference, because it's going to take a lot of work to start seeing an actual impact, and a lot of people not turning their cheek anymore and being understanding and doing their part. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. I really hope you learned something from this video. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Savannah's story and see the impact that she ended up ultimately making in the world. I know that I am very appreciative that you took the time to learn about these things and hopefully continue to educate those around you. I'm sure that her family feels the same, and I hope for nothing but the world for her daughter. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallen fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.